Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply suddenly stopped moving. Gas prices skyrocket overnight. Stock markets shake. Governments hold emergency meetings. Aircraft carriers move into position. And all of this begins because of a narrow strip of water, only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. This is the story of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important and tense waterways on Earth, where global energy, military power, and international politics collide every single day. The Strait of Hormuz lies between the coasts of Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south. On the map, it may appear small, almost insignificant, but its importance to the global economy is enormous. This narrow passage is the only sea route that connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean through the Gulf of Oman, and eventually the Arabian Sea and the wider world. Every day, massive oil tankers, some longer than skyscrapers laid on their sides, slowly navigate through these waters. They carry crude oil and natural gas from the Middle East to countries across the globe: the United States, China, Japan, India, and many nations across Europe. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this single choke point. In some years, that has meant more than 20 million barrels of oil every day moving through the Strait of Hormuz. To understand why this narrow passage is so critical, imagine the global economy as a giant machine. Oil and energy are the fuel that keeps that machine running. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important pipelines feeding that fuel into the system. If the flow slows down, the entire machine begins to struggle. For decades, energy from the Middle East has powered industries, transportation networks, and cities around the world. Major oil producers like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates depend heavily on this narrow shipping route. Almost all of their exported oil must pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Oil tankers leaving the Persian Gulf first pass between rugged Iranian mountains to the north and the deserts of Oman to the south. The navigational lanes are extremely narrow. In fact, ships travel through two shipping lanes only 2 miles wide each, separated by a buffer zone. This means that even a small disruption, an accident, a blockade, or military tension can create immediate global consequences. Throughout history, strategic waterways have shaped global power. The Suez Canal changed world trade when it opened in 1869, allowing ships to move quickly between Europe and Asia. Similarly, the Panama Canal transformed global shipping by connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But unlike those canals, the Strait of Hormuz is not man-made. It is a natural geographic choke point, and that makes it impossible to bypass easily. There are pipelines that move oil around the region, but none of them can fully replace the enormous capacity of oil tankers traveling through this narrow strait. The importance of the Strait of Hormuz is not only economic, it is also deeply tied to global military strategy. For the United States, protecting freedom of navigation in this region has long been a top priority. The U.S. Navy regularly patrols these waters through the United States Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, and submarines operate in the region to ensure that shipping routes remain open. Meanwhile, Iran controls much of the northern coastline of the Strait of Hormuz. Over the years, Iranian leaders have occasionally warned that if tensions rise or sanctions intensify, they could attempt to block or disrupt the strait. Even the possibility of such a move sends shockwaves through global markets. Oil prices can jump within hours simply because traders fear that the flow of energy might be interrupted. The tension surrounding the Strait of Hormuz is rooted in decades of geopolitical rivalry. After the Iranian Revolution, relations between Iran and the United States became deeply hostile. During the Iran-Iraq War, the region witnessed what became known as the Tanker War.
Both sides targeted oil tankers in the Persian Gulf in an attempt to damage each other's economies. Dozens of ships were attacked. The conflict eventually drew the United States directly into protecting shipping convoys moving through the Strait of Hormuz. It was one of the clearest demonstrations of how a regional conflict could threaten the global energy supply. But the Strait of Hormuz is not only about war and politics, it is also a place of constant activity and movement. Every day, hundreds of vessels move through these waters. Oil tankers, cargo ships, naval patrol boats, fishing vessels, and container ships carrying everything from electronics to food supplies. From space, satellites can track the steady procession of ships passing through the narrow lanes like vehicles on a busy highway. Yet beneath the surface of this routine activity lies a complex web of tension, strategy, and power. Energy demand around the world continues to grow, especially in rapidly developing economies. Countries like China and India import massive amounts of oil from the Middle East. Much of that oil travels through the Strait of Hormuz. This means that the stability of this single waterway affects billions of people, even those living thousands of miles away. When oil prices rise because of tensions in the strait, the impact spreads quickly. Higher transportation costs, rising food prices, and economic uncertainty. Despite its importance, the Strait of Hormuz remains extremely vulnerable. Because the shipping lanes are so narrow, even a relatively small number of naval mines could temporarily halt traffic. Fast attack boats, coastal missile systems, drones, or submarines could threaten large oil tankers moving slowly through the water. Military planners around the world study these risks carefully. They know that a major disruption in the strait could trigger one of the largest economic shocks in modern history. Over the years, several incidents have demonstrated how fragile the situation can be. There have been tanker seizures, drone shoot-downs, mysterious explosions, and confrontations between naval vessels. Each time tensions rise, global attention quickly focuses on the same place, the narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman. Because in that moment, the world is reminded of just how much depends on the safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Yet the story of the Strait of Hormuz is also a story about geography. Long before oil tankers existed, this narrow passage served as a gateway for traders traveling between the Middle East, South Asia, and East Africa. Ancient sailors once navigated these waters carrying spices, textiles, and precious metals. Today, instead of wooden ships powered by wind, enormous steel tankers powered by diesel engines move through the same route. But the principle remains the same. Whoever controls key trade routes holds tremendous influence over global commerce. The future of the Strait of Hormuz will likely remain tied to the world's energy transition. As countries invest more in renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and nuclear power, the global dependence on oil may eventually decline. However, for the foreseeable future, oil and natural gas will continue to play a central role in the world economy. That means the Strait of Hormuz will remain one of the most strategically important locations on Earth. Every night, long after most people have gone to sleep, tankers continue to move silently through the dark waters of the Persian Gulf. Navigation lights glow across the horizon. Radar screens track ships inching forward through the narrow lanes. Naval patrols watch from a distance. For the billions of people whose daily lives depend on affordable energy, the safe passage of those ships matters more than they may ever realize. Because in this narrow corridor between mountains and desert, the flow of the modern world never stops. And as long as the global economy runs on energy, the Strait of Hormuz will remain one of the most powerful and most fragile gateways on the planet.